What if there were no police? I curse this man who gave me this money. I sure hope he died of cancer, as they said, or they murdered him, as I was told. My mother came in before I entered high school. She came into my room and woke me up and I was in bed. And she had blood all over her dress and on her hands, splattered on her. And she described in detail how she and my father and the entire criminal gang, all the original 5 members of the gang, Strong Cop, Babyface Cop, female LGBTQ cop, and Gigi Treson, and my sister, they all went to this man's house who had given me the money. And they arranged it with his wife. He had cancer, and they gave him an overdose. They arranged for the wife to give him an overdose of drugs, of the cancer drugs, to put him to sleep. And then they all gathered around his bed, and they spent at least an hour and a half trying to strangle him to death. And they wanted the wife to do it. And then they had my mother doing it. And they had different people doing it, but he just kept waking up. They kept thinking he was dead. It's not easy to strangle somebody, apparently. And I've actually seen this before. When I saw this again when they tried to murder the famous violinist who is buried in Arlington Cemetery, who lived just over the line in Pennsylvania. So they spent hours trying to strangle him to death and finally just shot him in the head. Okay, which is what they ended up doing with my benefactor. My mother came into my room. She had blood spatters on her dress and on her arms and even a little bit on her face. And she wanted to show me. And she described in detail how they murdered my benefactor. They gave him an overdose of drugs. And then when they couldn't strangle him to death because he just kept waking up and started struggling and screaming, they put a gun in his mouth and blew his head off with his gun and then staged a suicide.